Thank you for tuning in to Entertain the Geeky, your source for nerd news.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Jason back at you with more nerd news. So we're going to do a little bit of different thing this week. We're going to do a year in review for 2017 from the video game industry. And joining me in this cataloging of the video game industry from 2017 is my resident expert on the subject, Mike Capuano.
Hello.
So Mike, I see your Facebook posts. You just, every great, good game release that gets a lot of attention, and even a lot that don't get attention, you are just on every one of them.
Yeah, well, in 2017, I knew that there was going to be a lot of good games coming out, so I decided to kind of shift my focus from some of my other nerd hobbies, and I set a goal of, if a game was coming out that I was interested in, just going ahead and getting it, which is something I've never done before. I've always kind of waited. So this year, there was no waiting. I had everything on pre-order, so I could always play things day one, or in some cases even earlier, because Amazon messed up a few times this year.
Mailed you some stuff early?
Yeah, I got Mario Odyssey early,
Nice.
Samus Returns early, couple other things as well. It was pretty nice.
Good job, Amazon.
Right. They also put some of my boxes in the middle of my yard one time and had a conversation, so not so good job there, but another story altogether.
But yeah, so you're just on it, and one of the things, I try to keep everybody up to date on the show with the news and the trailers and the release dates and stuff as they come out. But I'm pretty limited in my scope of what I can play. I rarely buy things brand new day one. I usually wait until there's a used copy or they go on sale. But so I've done my list of what I thought was the best game of 2017, limited to my scope, and I went with Resident Evil 7 because it's just a fantastic return to form for the franchise.
And like we were talking about earlier, it's a game I haven't actually played myself.
Yeah.
I've watched the whole thing through several times. I think it's a game that I would love to play, but I'm a giant coward when it comes to survival horror games. So I need to sit down with you or somebody else at some point. My wife won't do it because she's probably a giant coward too. But to just sit down and play through that game with a co-pilot, because there's no way I'm playing that game at home alone by myself.
Oh yeah, trust me when I say, my wife, she laughs at me, right? Because I'll be playing that game and I won't want to move through that, beyond that door to that next room, because I know something terrible is waiting for me, and it freaks you out. The game creates, the reason I think it was the best for me is it creates a real sense of fear in its players. And that's something that's hard to do when you're playing a video game, right? It's hard to really terrify me anymore because we've become so desensitized with the violence and the other horror things that have been, lumped in with other games, that we just don't get scared anymore. And that game creates that dread.
Sure. And I love to be scared, but I need that security blanket of a person with me.
Right.
I was saying earlier, when I was still back in high school, I played through Silent Hill 2 entirely with my baby sister. I would have been 17 at the time, so she was 6.
Right.
And she still remembers that to this day. But I didn't care that I was traumatizing her. I had to have that person. I love survival horror games. I can't play them alone.
Right.
So I'm hoping to get that game under my completed list sometime this year.
All right. Well, I'll be happy to sit down with you while you play through it.
Awesome.
Because it's great, and I'd love to just sit back and watch someone play it.
Cool.
But so me and Mike, mostly Mike, I kind of just wrote some stuff down. We put together a list of some things that Mike particularly would like to cover, and I'm going to start with the Switch because I have a PlayStation 4, and even though I've only played a couple of the games on your list, I don't have a Switch, and I want to play a Switch. I want to play Zelda and Mario and all of these new things that are coming. But so, I'm just going to go ahead and start with what I just said. We're going to start with Zelda, and give us just your opening experience when you first put it in and you booted it up and you started playing. What'd you feel?
I felt incredible nostalgia. I'm old enough that I was able to play the original Legend of Zelda when it came out. I was 3 years old, so I was just at the age where I started developing, cognizant thought, and
Sure.
I can still remember that. And I remember just not being told where to go.
Right.
I could go anywhere. You can play that original Zelda without ever getting the sword. Now it's hard,
Yeah.
but when I first put in Breath of the Wild, it was exactly like that. You you walk out and you just see this beautiful open world, and everything you can see, you can go to. And it was what I saw in my head as a child made manifest.
Right.
And I'm not a big open world game guy. There's a few exceptions, Skyrim and things like that. Dark Souls is okay. I love my Dark Souls. It's not really open world. It's the first one's the most quote unquote open world, just because it reconvenes in on itself a lot. But the other ones are a lot more linear. Dark Souls does have a lot of Zelda in its DNA.
Sure.
But typically, I'm not an open world guy. But to get me to buy in, you do interesting things. And I mean, I've played every mainline Zelda game in most of the handhelds. And so taking all that imagery and everything and throwing it into this, there's always something that I can find. We talked about this earlier. In the original Legend of Zelda, there was this piece of art, which was just Link looking off a cliffside, staring off into the world, Death Mountain in the background. And, I've read that was the inspiration for Breath of the Wild.
Sure.
And they just nail it. And, it's not a perfect game. It has its flaws, but it lets you do anything at any time.
Yeah.
Like in most games, you see something and you're like, man, I wish I could go there, and you can't.
Right.
And in
I wish I
here,
could climb that mountain in the background.
in this game, you can. It's if you have enough stamina to do it, then you can do it. And maybe you don't have enough stamina right now, so you mark that thing on your map, you pin it, and you come back later once you've had enough time to do it. I mean. And granted, there are some things that I've forgotten, which is why I've just started playing the game again. I beat it a year ago when it came out, and 2017 was such a huge year that I had to move on. But I decided that I wanted to dip back into the game now that all the DLC is out, and it just feels so fresh even now because it's a completely different experience than what I did the first time.
Yeah, you can always go a different direction and start in a different way.
I've gone completely different directions this time around, and
Yeah.
I've done so many different things already, and I'm incredibly overpowered right now just because of some of the things that I learned, and it's such a love letter to Zelda fans.
Sure.
My biggest concern is what can they do next. I think that they can't try and do this again. I hope they don't try and do a Breath of the Wild 2. I hope that they kind of go the opposite direction and maybe bring things in a little bit more and make a more concise and somewhat linear experience. Because the one thing that wasn't really huge about Breath of the Wild was the story. It has a story in there, but
Sure.
it tells it at your pace of play.
Right. Well, yeah.
And
you experience it as you want to.
And the fact that you can go and beat the game within, an hour and a half if you just run straight for the final boss, it just shows that wasn't necessarily their focus. This was, let's just make this big sandbox world, and it's basically Zelda, the physics simulator.
Right. Yeah.
And there's you can have a lot of fun with that. I love just like using my stasis rune to freeze a rock, hit it a bunch of times, jump on that rock, and go flying across the world. It's fantastic. You know?
For sure.
It's really easy to get lost and do a lot of nothing in the game, and it's great. It's great.
All right. Well, so one of the others. Prolific releases from the Switch was obviously Super Mario Odyssey.
Ah, yes.
So I'm curious on this one. What about this brings something new to the table that we have not seen in a Mario game before? Because I've seen a lot of videos and I've seen people playing it, and it kind of immediately reminds me of Super Mario 64. So that's the kind of styling and the kind of humor. That's what I get when I see these screenshots and these videos. So what does it offer fans that's different?
So, not a lot.
Okay.
It does offer one big thing, which I'll get to, but really it is just a refinement of what's worked before.
Sure.
I love all of the 3D Mario games.
Me too.
64, Sunshine, 3D World, and both the Galaxies.
Yeah.
Super Mario Galaxy 2, is one of the highest rated games of all time for a reason. It's great. This one just takes everything that worked in that and just refines it to a diamond tip edge. What it does do new, what I really love about it is, much like Breath of the Wild, it lets you get lost. It lets you explore. The worlds are huge. Every single world you go into, and there are some that are smaller than others.
Well, I've heard the number of collectibles is ridiculous.
It is. It's crazy, and I had to take a break even from it because I think there's something upwards of 900 stars or moons.
Yeah, moons.
In this one.
Jeez.
And I right now I'm at about 300. Yeah, I mean, like back then we thought like that was so ridiculous, and all we got for that was Yoshi on the roof of the castle.
Giving me 100 lives after I didn't need them.
Right, like I don't need them anymore.
Right,
but this one has some really cool things that open up after you beat the game. Like honestly, to complete the main story, 10, 15 hours.
Sure.
For most people. Obviously, there's speedrunners that are beating the game in an hour and a half or less now.
Right.
But the thing it does new is it lets you get lost in each one of these worlds, and there's so much to find and explore. And I really encourage anyone playing this game to don't use a guide. Don't use a guide.
Right, enjoy it. Yeah, in your own way.
Maybe once you've just gotten to that point where there's just a handful of moons, habits, moons that are left to find. Maybe then, if you're just trying for completion's sake, but while you're going through it, just play through the game, because you constantly will find this influx of the moons, and it's not a particularly hard game. It's not a game. It's
Mario's
not a game
never been. Yeah, I mean, there's some, I guess.
Now, here's the thing: it's not a hard game in the main story. It can get really hard once you've beaten the game. Some challenges open up, and it kind of has like this homage to Dark Souls.
Oh no!
I know how much you love Dark Souls, like I do. But there's actually these worlds, Dark Side and Darker Side, and it's like a boss rush and like these long levels, right, where you have to go through. There's no checkpoints.
Jeez.
So it feels very much like a Dark Souls game where you're going from the bonfire and going to fight a boss, and you're just praying to find that next bonfire because you don't want to lose your souls. And in this, you don't want to lose that progress you've made. And they're considerably long levels.
Sure.
So they're that ultimate challenge at the end of playing this fairly leisurely game.
Well, I mean, and every Mario game has tried to do that in some way. I mean, some of the things that we can look back. Super Mario World had its Star Road levels that were just ridiculously challenging levels. We can even look to Super Mario 64 with its collecting the 100 coins on each stage, right? Because honestly, if you didn't do that right away, that was always the last thing I did, right? I'd get all the stars and then keep going, beat the game, and then I'd go back through each level and get the 100 coins. And some of that was some of the most challenging, because I mean, there's 101 coins in the level,
right?
Total.
It's tedium, and
sure.
If there's one thing I hate about games is tedium.
Okay.
But Mario Odyssey is a collectathon without the tedium. At no point do I feel like, oh God, I'm just trying to get that last moon. Like I said, the only reason I'm not still going after them at this moment is because I have so big of a backlog.
Sure.
Not just from 2017, but from years prior. I have so many games that I'm trying to go through, but I'm craving to get back into that game, and it's actually a game I won't start over. Some games I walk away from for a while and I want to start over and experience fresh. This is a game that I think lends itself just to hopping in when you have time.
See, and that's great. That's something that I think is missing in video games, because I agree with you. Once if you've played 10, even 5 hours of a game's storyline and you're really getting into it, and then you get something else and you don't play it for a while, when you go back, you got to start at the beginning. You got to start over and go through it again.
Which is, we were talking earlier, Horizon Zero Dawn is a game that I'm going to have to do that with. Absolutely brilliant game. Played 20 hours of it. Breath of the Wild came out 2 days later. Sorry, Horizon.
Yeah,
it didn't stand a chance.
They made a bad choice on that release date.
It's done very well. So a lot of the people that weren't early adopters of the Switch, I think, got to get their Horizon time in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I pre-ordered my Switch, and Zelda came out day one. So yeah, it was an unfortunate thing. But anyway, back to Mario though. It's a game that I feel like I can just hop into anytime. And in fact, I have a plane ride, 5 hours tomorrow that I think I'll probably throw in some Mario Odyssey time and just pick up some of those moons. And
I'd be curious to see. Keep an eye out, because I'd be curious to see how many other people on the plane are playing Nintendo Switch.
It's an interesting thought. You know,
because it's such a travel accessory now, right?
The idea that maybe somebody, the seat across from me might have Mario Kart, we both hook in and
just play
locally wirelessly. That'd be pretty great, actually.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Interesting
thought.
But so, how do you think? So, we're going to move on here in a minute. But so, let me ask you just one simple question, right? So, where do you think Mario Odyssey fits in the pantheon of core Mario games, right? So, the core release games.
So it doesn't have that nostalgia factor. It plays on nostalgia, but it's too soon to tell. I think trying to rank a new game so early on in its lifespan is difficult. I definitely think that it's going to be one that people hold in high regard. It's very easy to pick up. It's really easy to quote unquote master. I think that it's going to go down as being a top 3 Mario game.
Okay.
I can't rank it yet because Mario 64 obviously is always going to have that special place. Mario 3, Super Mario World.
Sure.
Heck, even Mario Brothers 2. I love Mario Brothers 2. I like the weird games. But check back with me in 5 years, and I'm pretty sure that I'll say it's in the top 3.
Okay. All right. Well, so we've got one more thing we're going to talk about here for the Switch, and then we'll move on to the PlayStation 4 because I know Mike's itching to talk about that. So Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'm sorry.
The third game.
See, right?
The third game in the series.
The
number
third
2.
game, but number 2. They had that problem with Final Fantasy back in the day with the Final Fantasy 6 was actually Final Fantasy 3 in Japan.
Well, it was Final Fantasy 6 in Japan was Final Fantasy 3. Final Fantasy 4 in Japan was Final Fantasy 2.
Sure.
So, and it wasn't until later that we're like, oh wait, Final Fantasy 7 comes out, and then people were like, oh, people like Final Fantasy in the West, and then we started getting these games that
anthology discs that had all the originals.
By the way, Final Fantasy 2, avoid it; it's not good. Some people are like, oh, I don't like it.
But Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
So Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
Yeah, this game, and this is me from watching videos and reading articles about it. This game is a game I feel like we could fill a whole episode of talk time with, right?
You certainly could.
Right, but so obviously we want to move on to PlayStation here in a minute. I'm gonna whittle it down here for just one thing, right? Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Why is it one of the Switch games that you hold in such high regard?
Well, first of all, it's the first big JRPG on the Switch.
For the Switch.
It's a Nintendo Switch exclusive. Had a lot of support from Nintendo. So just being that first real meaty JRPG that I can get my teeth into on the Switch, that appealed to me. I also like the other games. The original Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii. Real interesting story about how it got here. We'll save that for another time. But,
sure, yeah.
But it was so unlike anything else on the Wii. It felt like a single player MMO. It felt like World of Warcraft, but you're playing by yourself. Maybe not appealing to everybody, but for me, it was just about that exploration and kind of like Breath of the Wild. But interesting thing, Monolith Soft, who is the creators of all the Xenoblade games,
sure.
They helped develop the open world of Breath of the Wild, which is why it's so good.
Makes sense.
The Xenoblade games, anything you can see, you can go to. Any monster that you see that's towering over the cities, you can fight. You may not want to right away.
Right, sure.
But eventually you can come back and take that thing down. And it just feels like this living, breathing world.
Okay.
And I never felt lonely in that game, which it kind of runs counterintuitive to it being like a single player MMO, but it always just felt very alive. And Xenoblade Chronicles 2 takes what the first 2 games in the series have done and just really refines them and improves upon the things that were lacking in there. Some of the combat system elements in the first 2 games were a little cumbersome, ponderous. In this, they simply map your abilities to 4 buttons. Okay. And there's some other things. Yeah, and it just, I don't want to say it speed things up because that's the complete opposite. And if you're somebody that doesn't like your battles taking a long time,
sure.
Avoid this game. There's no random battles in this. Everything you fight, you choose to fight. You might get caught by an enemy that's over your level. You might want to run away, but
sure.
That's your choice, right? But the battles do take a little while until you really have learned all the intricacies of the system.
Sure.
The thing that this game has going against it for new JRPG players is that it dumps a lot of information on you, and there's no way to go back and look at tutorials.
Sure.
So this is a game that you want to use the Switch's camera function to take a picture of each tutorial that comes up.
Okay.
Or to keep a notebook.
Sure.
Luckily, I've been playing JRPGs since forever, and I was able to get into it. But it's a slow burn at first.
Sure.
The game is 10 chapters long, each chapter, ranging, let's just say, anywhere from like 8 to 10 hours each, with some fluff in between. It takes until about the third chapter until the game really opens itself up to you, until you really get a grasp of how the game works.
Okay.
And I know everything I'm saying sounds like don't play this game, but it's a game that if you stick it out, it is so rewarding. It's a beautiful world. The story is every anime fan's dream.
Yeah.
It's super anime.
If you're digging anime, this is a game for you.
And like you and I talked about this earlier, I don't have the time to dive into an anime series these days. So
it's a big investment.
So this is great because it scratches both my itches.
Sure.
Well, really three: gaming in general, JRPGs, and anime. All three.
Right. Some big suggestions from Mike there about three, really, really must play. I would think you would say probably Switch titles.
Yeah.
If you're gonna pick up a Switch, if you're gonna try out the games, those are must plays.
Definitely Mario and Breath of the Wild, and then if you like JRPGs, if you like long games,
you like anime,
Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to the PlayStation 4, and we got a couple of things to cover here. I'm gonna start right at the top of the list with Persona 5. So. We are. So I don't know much about the Persona game series as a whole. So I guess for this, just for this, just give me a quick rundown.
Okay, relatively quick.
Yeah.
So the Persona games are sort of an offshoot of the Shin Megami Tensei games, which are super, super Japanese.
Clearly.
They wear their, Japanese on their sleeve.
Listen up, Webster. I just made up a new word.
But the Persona games specifically take those elements of the Shin Megami Tensei games, which are basically being able to either like capture or become these crazy monsters that like the designs are just insane. Throughout every sort of mythology, every mythology under the sun,
Sure.
Greek, Norse, Shinto, everything you can think of is there. But it sets it in a modern setting, and you always play as a group of high schoolers.
And so within this game series, though, is this is what's going on from 1, I'm assuming, to 5 an ongoing narrative?
Yes and no. There are definitely connections and allusions to things that have happened in the prior games, but each one is fairly standalone, and it does something really different. But there are things that carry over, and things that started off early on in the early games have become more prominent. There's a character that's kind of like the main. I don't know. I guess you would just call him like your like big assist. Like he's the guy that tells you what's going on. He's not really the narrator, but it's this character named Igor.
So he's like a sidekick.
He's not really a sidekick though. He's kind of the guy that tells you what you got to do. He tells you what's going on in like these weird dream states.
So he's an exposition robot.
There you go. That's pretty much what Igor is. But he starts off in the first game. He's just this sort of random NPC in these rooms, and that you go in like in your like save points. You go in and talk to him, and like he can help you to combine your persona, level up your persona, do different things with your abilities.
Sure, yeah.
But he has such an interesting design. He has this really long hook nose and everything. And it really was like eye catching, and so people liked him. So they started to develop that role to the point now that like he is like super important to the narrative of number 5.
Okay. So new fresh set of students every time, but a little bit of connective tissue. So what makes Persona 5 good? A worthwhile addition to your PlayStation 4 library?
So there's a lot.
So let's whittle it down to a couple of reasons.
the main thing for me is that it allowed me to live out this fantasy that a lot of us have of living in Japan as, you know, a young adult.
Okay. I don't have that fantasy, but if you have that fantasy out there, more power to you.
I always wanted to go to Japan. I've yet to go. I intend to someday, but
Sure.
the game does a near perfect replication of Shibuya.
Okay.
And in Tokyo. So you get to go and explore that world, and that's great. You get to live out this, you know, this world as this high school student and all the fun things that entails. But then there's this whole dark world, right? There's this evil underbelly of people's like dark secrets.
Sure.
And essentially the game is inform them. And there's this whole thing about the morality. Is it right to actually go into someone's subconscious and force a change? Thing to make these people
Inception
quote, unquote, better.
that question too.
It's very much like Inception.
Okay.
But
That
again,
gives me a bigger picture now. Yeah. Okay.
It's like an Inception anime. But it's also
more anime. All right.
It's also like this social simulator. You're going through and basically just like time is a resource. It's like a time management game, which doesn't sound fun on the surface, but you have so many days to complete certain things before the world ends and stuff like that.
Sure,
So you have to really balance what you do, who you hang out with.
Okay.
And it's hard to pin down, you know, why it's so good, but one of the main draws for a lot of people are just the aesthetics of the game. It has the slickest UI you've ever seen.
Okay.
When you look at this game, it's just
That's
so visually appealing.
Yeah.
It's I can't think of a single game that competes with this game's user interface, with the menus, and then the music on top of it. My PS4's theme right now is still Persona 5 because there's a song within the game that at this point my wife knows the lyrics to just from my menu,
right,
playing and everything. It resonated with me. It stuck with me in a way that few games ever have. But oddly enough, I don't know if I'll ever play it again.
Okay, so not much replay value.
I wouldn't say. I mean, if you play through it like I do, no. If you play through it where you're just kind of rushing through the story, then yeah, you could definitely. And there is a new game plus, but I was meticulous about making sure that
some people have to complete the game.
I restarted that game a lot because I was like, I just messed up, and I need to do this. So at the end of that game, I felt a satisfaction that I can't really ever say I've felt with the game. It felt complete, and it felt good. And there was something kind of sad and beautiful about it.
Okay.
That it was over.
All right. Well, that was, just glowing review of Persona 5, and I'm assuming you would probably recommend all the Persona games.
The first one's a hard sell, but after that, absolutely.
Okay.
Part 2 is actually 2 games. There's actually 6 Persona games, but for most people, I would say start with number 3 if you really want to get into the more modern ones. But if you really just want to get into what most people consider to be either number 1 or number 2, go with Persona 4 Golden for the Vita.
Okay.
It's the best version of that game, and a lot of people hold that in higher regard than even Persona 5.
Okay. Well, another game that was on our list was another sequel, right? Gravity Rush 2.
Gravity Rush 2 is a game that got so little attention, and it's a shame and it's a crime that people didn't pay attention to this game.
So yeah, this is one we were talking about because this is a very interesting thing, right? Video games in this day and age have they have as much advertising revenue put behind them as any Hollywood blockbusters that come out. Really, companies try to push the idea that this is just going to be great. And oftentimes they're right. Sometimes they're wrong. We've had a couple of releases, Call of Duty World War II, Star Wars Battlefront 2, that they were hyped a lot, but they're not.
They didn't live up to the expectations.
So what Mike's got here was, let me make sure I got this right. So what you've got here with Gravity Rush 2 is that this is just a game that didn't get enough promotion.
Right, and it's not underrated whatsoever. It's rated very highly.
Sure, it's got
amongst the people that know it. Right,
it's got a following.
It's so much so that they were going to be shutting down the online servers for the game, and there was enough of a following that petitioned for them to keep the servers going just a little bit longer, so that way people could complete the game, complete all the collectibles and everything.
Sure.
And they've extended that another 6 months. So
you've got a shelf life on this one.
Yeah, it's coming to, and it's a game that I'm never going to be able to 100% it. I've moved on at this point. Sure. It's not a game that I'll go back and play it again for sure, both 1 and 2. But there's going to be things that I can just never get, and I'm okay with that. It's mostly just little items that you can use. There's a photo mode, so you can like put them in the background and things like that. But unfortunately, they kind of anticipated a bigger turnout of fans, and just didn't happen.
So do you feel like they did a bad job of making the public aware that this was something they should be paying attention to? Or do you feel like the game just didn't have the following it deserved?
I think that the game doesn't have the following it deserves, but I also think it came out at a very bad time.
Was there something really taking focus at the time?
There were games that were coming down the pipeline. I think a lot of people were getting prepped for Horizon Zero Dawn and for the Switch releasing.
Okay.
It came out very early January, that or early February.
It just had the misfortune of being
first game. It got kind of lost in the shuffle. I mean, it's like a first party title. It was a PlayStation 4 exclusive.
Sure.
And I mean, so the original game originally released on the Vita, which is not a popular system in the States. Extremely popular in Japan.
Yeah, we weren't just PlayStation handheld wasn't the thing we wanted. I think.
Right. I mean, the PSP never really was great, and Vita even less so.
The PSP had those terrible like discs that were inside plastic cases.
Right, the little like UMD things. I think they're called
dinosauric.
Right. But the first game came out on PS Vita, and it got enough of a fan feedback that they actually remastered it for PS4.
Okay, sure.
Which is, in my opinion, the way to play that game. It looks great.
Sure.
So graphically, you wouldn't say that it's the best, but aesthetically, it's just gorgeous. It has this kind of throwback cel shaded thing, and yes, once again, it kind of is anime-esque.
Sure.
But it's beautiful to look at, and it plays so differently than any other game. Essentially, you're playing through like a superhero origin story. You play as this character named Kat, who can basically control the gravity around her. So essentially, you lift off the ground and you can fling yourself in like any direction. So it's this weird stereoscopic sort of experience where you're not flying, you're just falling in this sort of controlled way.
Falling with style. I think Buzz Lightyear.
Well, sometimes it can look really awkward at times. And, I have a video on Facebook. If you haven't seen, you should check out just to see what it looks like. But it plays like nothing else. It looks like nothing else. The music is just gorgeous, and it's just one of those games that I think the fans of the first one didn't even necessarily know there was a sequel to.
Sure.
Which is really unfortunate because the sequel improves on everything the first one did, which we've been saying a lot about a lot of these games.
Right,
like,
yeah.
Like I'm all for taking a concept that works and refining it.
Well, yeah, and it seems a shame that, something that obviously, has caught your attention and the attention of the core fan base didn't really get a lot of, widespread appeal.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan of those old things coming back around, the Kingdom Hearts series is completely redone and re-released on PlayStation 4, and you can play every single game before the hotly anticipated third Kingdom Hearts game that hopefully will be coming out later this year.
I should say you can experience all of the games on PS4 because there are 2 games that you can't actually play, which are the two DS handhelds.
Yeah.
Those are just cinematics, and really, I'm going to be honest, that's the way to experience them. Those games are, so 358 over 2 days is worth playing in my opinion. Not necessarily for everybody, but Recoded is trash.
The way that they did the battle system, the thing about Kingdom Hearts that always really stuck out to me was taking these kinds of RPG elements that we had become so ingrained with in gaming as a hobby and flipping those things on their head and allowing for the first time done in a good way, I think, full freedom of movement that actually affected how the battles were done with enemies and bosses.
Sure.
Where when I dodged, it was because I dodged.
Yeah.
It wasn't based on some random algorithmic, mathematical equation that decides whether or not I get to dodge.
Right. It's interesting, like that you point that stuff out, because a lot of people hail Kingdom Hearts 2 as the best as far as gameplay goes, and I love Kingdom Hearts 2. I think Kingdom Hearts 2. I think Kingdom Hearts 2's story drew me in even more than the first one. But it's interesting because the first Kingdom Hearts has a lot more depth than people give it credit for.
Oh no, absolutely.
And it's something they kind of did away with in the second game, which is your reaction to things could result in these things called tech points, right?
Right.
That's not in Kingdom Hearts 2. Kingdom Hearts 2 to me felt like a lot more like a button masher. You could kind of just press attack to win a lot of the times, unless you're playing on higher difficulties.
Right, but they also, so I think I agree with you that those things kind of changed, but I think that they replaced those things with the systems like the forms and and the more expanded summons that we got in the second game. And I think that's actually a better representation of its
And here's my challenge to that, though, is that artificially makes it seem deeper. Because you have these different playstyles which all give this sense of greater movement, and you have two Keyblades. So it's like Sora goes Super Saiyan, which is really cool, right?
Well, that was exactly. I'm not arguing that at all.
In the first game, I feel like there was a lot more strategy in how you would approach things. Let's look at that. That battle against possessed Riku.
Yeah. On the altar and not.
It's infamous, right? I don't remember what it was called.
Yeah, those were all the princesses were being
something anime.
Yeah.
But back in the day on PS2, cutscenes weren't skippable, and I know that you and everyone else who ever played that game, the power of darkness many, many times.
Oh, that story was the story. I mean, the story of that game. It was what built this world, but it lacks a lot of what the depth that came into the story much later.
Right. Well, but there's something nice about how simple it is, because the Kingdom Hearts games at this point have become so crazy, and if you don't play some of those sort of side games, you're like, huh? Right. Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and now 3 coming, but there's been so many other games.
It really
Birth by Sleep is completely necessary, and also probably the second best Kingdom Hearts game in my opinion.
Yeah.
But anyway, to bring it all back, this year we got the 1.5, 2.5 collection, and then 2.8, a fragmentary passage.
Yeah, what's going to be really messed up is I'm going to be pissed if the next thing that comes out is not Kingdom Hearts 3.
But 2.9?
2.9, the final product mix bullshit.
It won't. Allegedly, we're getting a 3. They say 2018. That's the hard date. Nomura's been very, very adamant that we are getting it this year.
I'll believe it when I actually have a date.
I know. But man, I don't want to get my hopes up, but I'm so excited right now. I'm so excited. But
if Kingdom Hearts 3 is something that you are looking forward to, as I think anybody that's ever played a Kingdom Hearts game is really interested to see how this story kind of comes all full to life, you can literally play pretty much every Kingdom Hearts thing.
Yeah.
And get yourself all hyped and ready for that release.
And I highly, highly recommend picking up the even though it's got his Dream Drop Distance, which released on 3DS, really, really solid game.
Sure. Also, you get the basic what is basically a demo for Kingdom Hearts 3 as far as gameplay goes.
Blueberry Mom.
Yeah. So it's definitely worth picking up. I think just to get a feel for what is going to change about combat and how things are done in Kingdom Hearts 3. And I'm sure we're going to still be experiencing. I mean, if you watch the recent trailers, there's some crazy stuff happening with the Keyblade. I mean, he's doing all kinds of things that we've never seen Sora do. So it's going to be great.
Which it all ties back to Birth by Sleep. They were able to transform their Keyblades, and now Sora's doing it. Finally getting that ability.
It's going to happen. So, we've talked about some amazing. Obviously, I think Mike. The reason picking these games was it's a highly recommendable list. If you have not tried these games out, if you have not played the Switch and tried Zelda and Mario, if you have not tried the Persona games, or want to play Kingdom all in one or in 2 discs now. So I think I want to bring it all around, and I want you to give me your top 5 games of 2017. Right, so we'll quickly go through this list and give me just what's the top 5 that you would 100% recommend to any fan.
Awesome. And just for the record, apologies to Xbox One fans. There's just no exclusives on there that really grab me.
There's Halo.
It's been out for a while.
That's true.
I can't think of any Xbox One exclusives in 2017 that really had the impact that the Switch and
because honestly, most of the things like Zero Dawn and some of these things, they were all coming out. Yeah, they were all coming out exclusively to PS4.
Sony did a really good job this year. But top 5.
Right. So hit me number 5.
Number 5, Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
Okay. And
you're going to notice a theme here with Switch games. Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It was that first really big, open world JRPG on the Switch, and so I bought in super hard. I put over 140 hours in that game, and I beat it in less than a month, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
Number 4, game we didn't talk about earlier, is Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. So this game I almost didn't even get, but I was hearing that like it had some pretty interesting things about it. So I went ahead and pre-ordered it, got it first day. Oh my god, I fell in love with this game. It's interesting that a third party developed the most Mario of Mario games.
Sure, absolutely.
It is an absolute love letter to Mario. It's Mario meets XCOM, which is a recipe that shouldn't work and yet makes the most delicious of cakes.
Yeah, somehow it does.
It's
right?
so good.
So, but try out the Rabbids Mario game.
But it was only the second best Mario game. Number 3, Super Mario Odyssey. Any other year, this could have been a number 1,
sure,
like easily.
The year was crazy.
But there's so many good games this year. Yeah. I would say that 2017 is in the top 3 for best years in video games.
Sure. I think most fans would agree.
We talked about Mario Odyssey. You know what I like about it. But above that, shockingly, not number 1 as well. Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Right.
A game which years from now could rank even higher. Right now, I'm going back through it again, and that says something that I wanted to jump back into it less than a year later.
Right.
After
Absolutely,
reading it.
Yeah. Replay value is important.
But tremendous game. If you can't get a Switch, if you have a Wii U, it's available on there. Some people don't know about that, and it plays almost as good.
Okay.
Has a couple slowdown issues on there.
So of the 4 games you just listed, I mean, it is crazy that there could be one single game in your mind that is just above those 4. What are some of the best games of the year? So give me number 1.
Persona 5. Persona 5 is the game that I played the longest in a single playthrough. At the end of it, I had played over 160 hours of that game. Which is I've put that amount of time into plenty of games, especially like World of Warcraft back in the day.
Sure,
but never in just one single playthrough. It made me laugh. It made me cry, and I got so absorbed in those characters, and I really felt like I was living that game. By the time the credits rolled, I felt like I had actually lived a year of these characters' lives.
The lives of these teenagers.
And I know, right? Like, I'm 34, but I'm like, I want to be a teenager. But the thing is that these characters are not written like your typical teenagers.
Right. Games take us away to the kind of worlds that we are in awe of.
But I mean,
And from what I'm hearing from you, I mean, this game just transports you to a different place.
It absolutely does, and that's the best kind of gaming. And
I agree. Yeah,
like my top 2, those are the games that do that. Breath of the Wild and this game do transport me away from the rigmarole of life.
9 to 5,
the other games,
going to work.
The other games are great, but they feel like games, and I like that. I like when a game feels like a game, but every now and then, certain games can just really capture you and completely transport you away from whatever's going on.
Sure.
And no more so than what Persona 5 did. And again, it's not a game that I can really foresee myself playing again. And to me, that's what makes it even more perfect. It's always going to be that game that I played in the year of 2017 that just perfectly encapsulated what I love about games.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I got to experience that.
Right. Well, guys, some great recommendations from. I mean, if after sitting here for 40 minutes with us, you don't understand why this man is the guy to talk to about video games, you haven't been paying attention at all. So some stellar recommendations, Mike. I want to thank you for coming on the show and
thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, and sitting and just talking to us about the nerdy stuff that we love. So guys, if you're digging what we're putting down, I want you to do me a favor. Go over on to entertainthegeeky.com. Check out the website. We've got the blog post there. We've got the nerd news stuff. We've got both the podcasts able for you to, easily to find and check out what Roger and Chris have got going on and all the past episodes that I've got going on with some of the greatest guests. And Mike, you're in the top now. You might be the best guest I think we've had on this show. That was fantastic. So don't forget, guys, to check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/entertainmentgeeky. Don't forget to check us out over on Twitter at entertaingeeky. And if you want to chat with me and give me some ideas or some things you'd like to hear me talk about on the show, shoot me an email at etgnerdnews@gmail.com. So that's gonna bring us to the end. I again thank you so much to Mike for coming on the show and hanging out with us. We'll definitely have you back as the year unfolds here, and we've got
a lot of good things coming down this year.
There absolutely is. So until that time, guys, do me a favor, stay geeky.